Hello everyone, we are live on air with Live on Air, and welcome back to another Philosophy Thoughts episode with me, Olivia Calladine Smith, your host. I'm a university student at the University of Bristol studying philosophy and French, and I have a passion for philosophical debate and meaningful current discussions. Now, I want to show you how you can use philosophy to tackle your everyday life problems as well as other ethical dilemmas. We will be going from discussions on social media, AI and other current affairs to crime, relationships and tips for success and growth. Live on Air is a safe space where you can contribute your controversial and uncomfortable questions so that I can discuss them and tackle them with you all. And for the students out there, you will also be gaining exclusive tips and advice to academic success. I cannot wait to discuss with you all in this judgment-free zone. You can expect to start thinking like a true philosopher. You're watching Live on Air. Hello everyone, welcome back. Today's episode, as you've seen by the title, this is a generational debate. Does money really buy happiness? Let's start by answering, why is this actually a philosophical debate? Well, this is an ancient question that goes back hundreds of years, and we can go back to Greek philosopher Aristotle, and they wanted to define what a good life was, and Aristotle said that was something called eudaimonia, which is the human state of flourishing, and that wasn't necessarily in terms of wealth, but we'll go on to that later on. But philosophy asks, what is considered a good life? And so philosophy explains why the correlation between money and happiness actually matters, and essentially what it means for a human life to be truly wealthy. I think a lot of people's basic responses are, you have two sides of the coin. A lot of people say, well, if I have loads of money and I can buy whatever I want and have any experience I want, then surely I will be happy. And then you have, the other side where people say, there's a lot of people with money who are not happy. And I want to break that down and question that a little bit more philosophically, because we hear the same points of view, but we don't actually understand what happiness is. How do we actually define happiness? And what is contingent on the other? Does happiness depend on money, or does money depend on happiness? I want to start by talking about this philosophical quest to define what happiness is and define, what is considered a good life. And this is called the value theory. And this is an Aristotelian theory. And he talks about, like I said, eudaimonia, human state of flourishing. And, within that value theory, he talks about two different types of values: instrumental value and intrinsic value. If we think about money, it has instrumental value. It's not intrinsically and internally the source of happiness, I don't think. I think it's something that we can use to buy comfort, buy security, buy convenience, all things that can lead to happiness but not necessarily entail happiness. Whereas intrinsic value is when something is valuable in of itself. Happiness is actually part of that thing and it can't kind of be separated. So it's not used as a means to an end, but it's actually an end in itself. It's not used to buy things that can bring us happiness, but rather internally contains the source of happiness, if that makes sense. You know what? I think the source of a lot of people's unhappiness in life actually is the fact that people attach the identity of someone being happy to money. It is more serious than we think, but only a conversation like this would reveal that. I saw on the news yesterday actually, a guy who had a very interesting story. Now I'll go into it in a second, and actually it's quite sad, and it kind of reveals a bit more of the truth behind this question. Now, of course, we're talking about instrumental happiness. Now, I do think happiness can be derived from instrumentally valuable things like money. It can be used to buy convenience. You can buy a chef who can cook you food every day. But then what if you start to feel less good about yourself? You could get everybody to do something for you at your own convenience, and you would probably think to yourself, I'll be happier that way. But actually, there's a lot of people who choose to work when they don't actually need to work, because doing nothing doesn't fulfill them, doesn't make them happy. A lot of humans want to feel useful. And so we can't, like I said, necessarily say that just because it's instrumentally valuable, you can use it to buy yourself security, comfort, convenience. It doesn't mean you'll necessarily be happy, but it can buy happiness. Prime example is, charities who, if we give money to charity and that money is then used to help people, that money has bought the happiness of those. Say we're talking about like, charity helping with families and starvation, that can bring them happiness. But at that point, when they've got the food that they need, then life still throws things that can make you unhappy and outweigh the fact that you have food on your plate. Obviously, for the sake of the video, I'm going to probably overthink this more than maybe necessary, but I just think with money, the problem is I think it's a short-term pleasure. The things that it buys is short-term pleasures. And now that actually brings me on to my next thought, and I actually would call it my own theory. Oh dear. Oh, maybe I should be a philosopher. Well, anyway, we digress. So what my theory is you kind of have to define happiness. I think happiness is when a being is happy in of itself. It doesn't rely on anything going on around it in reality, but rather you can be put in any given situation and your soul is actually happy in of itself. It's not reliant on your situation as such. You're just happy. To me, happy is not having money so I can buy something. Happiness is even when I'm low, even when I don't have anything, I can still be happy. And I tell you why this is really important is because if you make that the deciding factor of whether you're happy or not, chances are you're going to not be happy for most of your life. I could have storm and wind around me, but you can find happiness within that because you need to find the happiness intrinsically. I think that's what happiness is. You kind of imagine yourself as just a happy soul floating around. And yeah, that's just how I think about it. You just can't attach your feeling of happiness just to, objects in the world. Actually, this brings me on to the different types of happiness. And this is another philosophical reference. So we have hedonism and then we have eudaimonia. Now, hedonism is short-term happiness. And then we have eudaimonia, and that is defined as deep fulfillment. Hedonism is short-term pleasures. You'll buy a bag, it will buy you happiness for, the rest of the day. Whilst you just got that new item, you've left the shop, you're really happy, and then you're not happy anymore because it's just the fact that you've been able to buy that thing has brought you happiness, but you're not actually happy yourself. But eudaimonia is the human state of flourishing. It's deep fulfillment. It's fulfillment beyond the material world. In a metaphysical sense, it's within, it's in your soul. Deep fulfillment is when you learn to love life. You learn to love people for who they are. You learn to love yourself, and that will bring you true happiness and peace. I don't think just having lots of things, lots of material wealth can actually make you happy. I think it's just happiness on a surface level, and I would call it hedonism, short-term pleasure, rather than eudaimonia, human flourishing. And this is why, there's a lot of rich people who aren't happy. Unfortunately, like I said, life still happens. You can have a massive house, loads of cars, everything in the world that you ever want. You can sit back and do nothing. But there's also something to be said, one, that novelty wears off. Also, people always want more. Humans naturally just want more all the time. More. So I actually think no matter how much you can get, you'll never be content. And it's sometimes the people with the little things who are just happy and appreciative, and they don't actually want anything more because they're happy with that alone. Unfortunately, there's examples where people are in unhappy relationships. They have all the money in the world, but if you're not a nice person, or you're not with a nice person, or you don't actually appreciate life, then how can you actually be happy? That money doesn't buy you happiness. Or if unfortunately some people become very ill, when you're ill, what is wealth when you're unwell? At that point, you might not be happy, or you might be grieving over a loved one. What can money even add to that? It's like when institutions, they cause the death of someone and they say, oh look, we'll give you your family £1 million to make up for this. And most of the responses of those people who have lost a family member, they say they would take that loved one back for that £1 million in a heartbeat. Yeah, they can go and buy themselves a new house. Yeah, they can go and buy themselves nice things, but that's actually not happiness. And I take myself to maybe like an example, and I know this is quite a drastic example, but if you were ever in, like, for example, a burning fire and someone told you, would you rather keep all your possessions or keep your life? You're obviously going to keep your life. And it just shows that those things never really meant that much. Those things never really brought you happiness, because you would be very happy to walk out of that building with yourself alone, and you would be happy for your life. And I think that's where the state of happiness that people need to get to, that they can have nothing, that they can leave all their possessions behind and still be happy. And that's why a lot of people who tend to go through hardship in their life or really traumatic situations, they tend to be happier and appreciate their life more, because it's that makes them realize how worthless having material wealth actually is, and the things that it buys you. And this is not me saying that you shouldn't want to become wealthy in life, but everyone does. Everyone wants to do well and have money and be in a comfortable situation. But at the end of the day, I just don't think you should make having money your ultimate driving force behind your life, because when times get tough, you will not be happy. And it's a very slippery slope, attaching your emotions to whether you have money or not. And I tell you why this view is so good is because it made me realize that I should always go after what I'm actually passionate about and what I enjoy. And that's how I will get fulfillment. And I have to say, speaking to an audience, sharing my views is something that I genuinely enjoy. I am here at 7 o'clock in the morning, guys, and I am doing this because I enjoy it. If someone asked me to wake up to go and sit in an office to do finance, yes, I might have loads of money and I might have the capabilities to go into finance. But you know something? If someone asked me to put my alarm on for 5:45 in the morning to get up and go to work, I would tell them no. And the same goes for, the other career paths that my parents suggested to me, dentistry, medicine. I really, really respect those people in those career paths. But as of now, I know that would not bring me happiness and fulfillment. And so I choose, and I encourage everyone, always do things, always pursue things that actually bring you deep fulfillment, because you will spend your whole life working at something you do not enjoy. And unfortunately, when everyone leaves in the end, all that money that you made, you have kind of nothing to show for it. Like, you didn't really get to live your life the way you wanted to live it. That's why you should always try and be deeply fulfilled, not just have short-term pleasures. And that is one thing that's important in the world of work, because money is almost always the only prize that they can see. Truth is, if you actually just love what you do, you will naturally lead to success, because you will put your everything into that. And I don't think there's anything you can put your everything into and not succeed. I also don't want to be the person to pick a career path that I'm only picking because I want money, because I think that I'm going to be happier that way when I have money. That's how you actually be content in yourself. That's how you actually be content in life, because you're doing something you love. And you know what? This actually now brings me on to the ITV news of a man called Alex Taylor. And he is one of the only people who has died and then become alive again. He died for 40 minutes. He was in a coma for a week, and then he came back alive. I read this news article. His view and what he said was so life-changing in terms of a perspective. But before he died, he was a workaholic. He was a money-driven person, and his pursuit for his whole life up until about 40 years old was just making money. He had no time for his family, no time to actually live. He was just living to make money. And when this happened to him, he came back alive, and he lost his memory, he lost his stamina. He has now partial vision. Not complete, he didn't lose all his memory, he just lost a lot of his memory, partial vision. And now he is an author. His life is a lot slower. He has time for his family. And one of the things he says was he wouldn't change what happened to him for the world. He is very happy that he went through that, and now he lacks the ability to go out and work and earn loads of money, because he says that I have a much richer existence. I found that story so eye-opening, because it just shows that someone like Alex Taylor he worked so hard. He put money first, and he explained he was never actually happy. He was just living on the surface, and he never had really a relationship with his family because that was his ultimate goal. But he has a richer existence now that he has less. And I just found that it just speaks for itself, really. He prefers his life now. Moral of the story, it just shows that money never brought him happiness. Being slower with his life, appreciating his family and doing nice things and doing something he actually loved, which was being an author and writing, that brought him deep fulfillment. And it reminds me of another person who earned a lot of money over their lifetime, and that's the owner of Apple, Steve Jobs. He died not too long ago from pancreatic cancer, unfortunately. But I read his last message that he put out to the world. In summary, he was saying that whatever you do, make sure you don't make money and hoarding your money and just having money at the forefront of your life. He said he never actually got to live. He just made money, and that never made him happy. The fact is, if you want to have money, you have to work extremely hard. And if you work yourself to the ground to have that money, just so that you can feed off of those luxuries that you then get from that, that process of getting the money in the first place doesn't allow you to live or be happy. I know there's a lot of people out in the world who are happy and have money, and everyone does it their own way. I'm not even saying that there's people in this world who have money and who are not happy, because that's just not true. But it's just a couple of examples putting into perspective that maybe money doesn't really buy happiness. Maybe the people that are rich in the world and have a lot of money and yet they're still happy, maybe because they have a good relationship, maybe because they actually appreciate life, maybe through their struggles over life they learnt to actually flourish. You don't know that their wealth is linked to their happiness. You don't actually know that. And in the same way, there's a lot of people who are poor, who have the least, that are genuinely happy, and you wouldn't think, oh, how are they happy? They don't have any money. But that's because that's not where happiness comes from. They've appreciated life, and in the same way that someone who's rich can appreciate life too, appreciate themselves. So it all just depends on the situation and the person. But more generally, I just think money does not buy happiness. And I touched earlier on the idea of you always wanting more. And this links to the philosophical idea argued by Epicurus and also Stoicism. They argued that true happiness comes from inner tranquility rather than increased consumption. And it's that idea of consumerism versus stoicism. A lot of humans, they just want to consume more. No matter how much you give them, they always want more. They'll always find a way to want more, because the fact is, you can give someone loads of money, ultimate money, unlimited money, and they're still gonna want more because there's a hole in them that they haven't fulfilled. And that is why I say money doesn't buy happiness, because actually, no matter how much you can access and how much you can afford, if that hole still exists within you and you don't have that inner tranquility, you're never going to feel happy or fulfilled. As you consume more, your expectations rise above what you already have, and then this creates a cycle of dissatisfaction, because you will always level up your expectation based off where you're already at. And so that's why money doesn't buy true happiness. It buys comfort, security, convenience. Yeah, there's something to be said for money buying amazing experiences. I definitely agree with that, actually. But it just buys the means to happiness. It doesn't buy happiness alone, because you could buy a lovely experience on holiday, but if you go with someone who doesn't bring you happiness and you don't feel deeply fulfilled with, then you're not going to be happy that you're going on that experience. So like I said, there's just so many other factors that play a part in your happiness other than just the things that you can buy with it. And I tell you what, looking at happiness in this way makes happiness never fragile, because you can have so much or so little, and the happiness is contained within. It's not dependent on any other factor around it. And I'd hope by watching this, you will realize to change your thought process, change how you view money, And maybe that way money will actually start to come to you. The thing is, when you become deeply fulfilled as a person and you're very happy in of yourself, you have so much more to live for. And at that point, I feel that you appreciate every opportunity. You feel more uplifted to just do well in life. If you think about it, you go into work, you're really unhappy because you just want money. You're probably not going to be in the best mood when you're doing that job. And so the employers who've employed you can probably see through that. She doesn't have much enthusiasm for this job. Naturally, where do you think that will lead you? Maybe you won't have an increased salary. Maybe you won't network as much because you're not actually happy in the environment. But think about genuinely loving what you do and loving who you are and loving the people around you, loving your job, being deeply fulfilled. You will come across better to people. You probably will excel more because you go into it so much more positively, and people will see that. And naturally, that as a byproduct, you will get more money, you will be promoted, things like that. And, we've all heard the term money is a source of all evil. And that's all about what money can actually do in a negative way. People always say money corrupts. And it's true. You can see it in politics or even in like relationships where one person has a significant amount of money. Sometimes that can corrupt their behavior and turn into vice, which is obviously not true in all cases, but there's definitely so much evidence for it in the world today. But the last thing I want to say, the most important thing in our lives is our health. Retaining money a lot of the time requires us to put our health aside. And, like I go back to Alex Taylor, if he wasn't lucky enough to become alive again, and he actually did leave his family behind, he would have left his family behind at the cost of just making money. Your health is never worth just having loads of money. You can't do anything with your money if you're unwell. All of that goes out the window. Yeah, you have to be very wary of how much you hyperfixate on the importance of money in your life. And just know that true happiness is not something temporal and flaky that goes very quickly. It's something that can sustain through the wind and the storm. Another way we can explain the way in which money buys happiness is kind of like drugs or smoking. That feeling of happiness fades away quite quickly. People who smoke or take drugs in order to ease their mind and feel happy and overcome their depression. That's why a lot of people say it's not drug abuse and becoming an alcoholic or anything is not the answer when you're unhappy and you need something to make you feel happy, because it's a short-term pleasure that fades very, very quickly. And that's not me putting anyone to shame that has turned to that, but it's a message to you that in the same way that happiness that you feel when you smoke, and I haven't smoked, but that happiness that you supposedly feel when you smoke and when you take drugs and when you drink alcohol is something that is very flaky and does not last. It's not durable whatsoever. And that's the same thing with money. I don't think it's something that brings you to, long-lasting, deep happiness. And, to end out, I am completely aware of some of the amazing things that you can do with money, and I'm not disregarding that whatsoever, but I think it's actually more important to look at the flip side of what money can do. For example, you need money for a life-changing operation. If you have that money, then of course it's going to provide the condition for happiness, because you're going to be able to save that person's life. So of course money can buy happiness in that sense. I mean, this is for all people of all ages, but it's especially important for young people going into adulthood, because that pressure to have money and to look rich and to think that having a rich existence is having money, and trying to put that message out to people that that you have lots of money. You don't need to have the pressure of trying to look rich or trying to act like you have money. And there's a lot of people who do it who don't have a lot of money, but for some reason they try to make themselves look rich. And the truth of that is when times really get tough and they haven't fixed the hole inside of them, they've just try to put on a facade the whole time that they have loads of money and that makes them happy. The truth is, a lot of these people who make it look that way, they are not happy. They are insecure. They don't feel fulfilled in life. And to be honest, I don't think it's positive to be that person. I think focus less on trying to look like you have money and you're actually unhappy, and focus more on trying to actually be happy. And through that, you will make money and people will see your richness in terms of your enthusiasm and your charisma and your positivism and not through what you're wearing and what bag you're holding. Aristotle proposed the golden mean, and this was basically centered around the argument that at some point when you have a certain amount of stuff, no additional income can actually increase your happiness to a significant degree. Once you have the basic needs in life, just adding extra money to buy luxuries, it doesn't actually bring you deep fulfillment. You'd be a lot happier if you actually started to help people and be charitable in the world rather than consume for yourself. I don't think a person that doesn't share, it's not compassionate, can truly be happy. But yeah, I like to end up by saying, again, this is not to say you shouldn't strive to, earn a lot and be ambitious, but remember not to attach your identity to your wealth. Find happiness and deep fulfillment beyond your wealth. Don't put so much pressure on yourself to be wealthy to the point where you become unhappy, and just know that there's more to life than money. If you do things that you love and you enjoy and you really appreciate life and the people around you, you will be a lot happier than just having material wealth in this world. But yeah, that is everything I have for today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure to follow me on my other social media platforms on Instagram and TikTok at liv.on.air, and you can also find the audio versions of my episodes on Spotify at LivOnAir. Now go out there and get that bag. No, I'm joking, don't. No, I'm joking, do get that bag. But yeah, just enjoy what you're doing. Whatever you're doing today, work, just enjoy it. Studying, whatever you study, find happiness within that. But that is Olivia Caroline Smith, your host. Bye for now.